My world ended on a Tuesday at a dusty bus station in the middle of nowhere. I was 60 years old, stranded and utterly invisible to the world until a blind man offered me a new identity and a life I could never have dreamed of. This is the story of how being completely erased was the beginning of my life, finally being written in ink instead of the fading pencil of a man who never believed he was enough. The argument with Sarah, my wife of 35 years, didn't start that day. It had been simmering for decades, a low boil of resentment that I had learned to ignore. But that morning, on a trip to visit her cousin upstate, the pot finally overflowed. The 2-hour bus ride was a study in silence, punctuated only by the frantic tapping of her thumbs on her phone screen. She'd smile at something, a private little curve of her lips that was never meant for me, and my heart would sink another inch. I spent the journey staring out the window, pretending the landscape of my own failure wasn't rushing by. When we arrived at the small, dilapidated station, little more than a covered platform and a bench, she announced she wanted to get some local fudge from a shop across the square. My knees, worn down from a lifetime of manual labor, ached from the journey. "I'll wait here for you," I said, gesturing to a sun-bleached wooden bench. That's when it started. Sitting. Always sitting, Michael. Her voice was a whip crack in the quiet air. "You're always tired. You always have some excuse. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to be married to a man with no ambition? A man who is content with mediocrity?" People on the platform turned to stare. Heat rushed to my face. "Sarah, please." "Not here," I whispered, the words feeling weak and pathetic. "Not here? Then where, Michael? In our miserable little apartment? The one you still haven't finished paying for after 20 years? She let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "Look around you. We're in a forgotten town at a filthy station because we can't even afford to travel like normal people." Each word was a precise, practiced stab. I reached for her arm, a feeble attempt to calm her, but she recoiled as if my touch was acid. "Don't," she spat. "Don't you ever touch me again?" The silence that followed was heavier than the shouting. She took a deep breath, looked at her phone one last time, and then her eyes met mine. They were cold, empty. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. "You know what, Michael? I'm done. I'm not spending the rest of my life tied to a man who's going nowhere." She opened her purse, took out my wallet, and dropped it on the bench. Then, in a move of pure cruelty, she snatched it back up. "Actually, what do you need this for out here? You can walk." "Sarah, what are you doing?" The plea in my voice was humiliating even to my own ears. "I'm leaving you. Right here, right now. You can walk home or you can stay here and rot. I genuinely don't care." She turned and walked briskly toward the bus we had just arrived on. The driver was still there, drinking a coffee. I watched, paralyzed, as she spoke to him, gesturing toward me. He shrugged, nodded, and they both boarded. The engine coughed to life, and I stood there, a statue of disbelief, as the bus pulled away, taking my wife, my wallet, and my identity with it. The sun beat down on my balding head. The station was nearly empty now. Just a couple of vendors packing up, a mother with 2 small children, and an old man sitting on the bench opposite me, wearing dark sunglasses and holding a white cane. A blind man. I felt the world crumble under my feet. 30 miles. 30 miles on ruined knees, without a dollar, without a drop of water. At 60 years old, with a heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, I sank onto the bench, buried my face in my hands, and for the first time since my mother died, I wept. I cried from a place so deep and broken I didn't know it existed within me. And then I heard a voice, soft but firm. "Excuse me, young man." I lifted my head, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. The blind man was turned toward me, as if he could see right through his dark lenses. "Are you talking to me?" I asked, my voice thick. "I am," he said. "I heard everything. And I am truly sorry for what you've just endured." "Thank you," I mumbled, wanting nothing more than for the earth to swallow me whole. I'll be fine." "No," he said, his voice taking on a new seriousness. "You won't be?" But you will be if you listen to me. I need you to pretend something for me, just for a few minutes. I stayed silent, utterly confused. He leaned slightly toward me, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried an unimaginable weight. Pretend you're my son? My private driver will be here in 5 minutes, and your wife is going to regret leaving you next to the richest man in this city. I stared at him, sure I was hallucinating from the heat or the grief. Pretend to be your son? The richest. The words died in my throat. This had to be a scam, a cruel trick played on a broken man. Sir, I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. The old man offered a small, knowing smile. Because I know precisely what it feels like to be left with nothing. And why shouldn't I? He adjusted his glasses. My name is Arthur Vance, and if that name sounds familiar, it's because you've likely heard of me. Arthur Vance, the name didn't just hit me. It detonated. Vance Industries. The food processing plants, the hotels, the commercial real estate that spanned the state. A man whose fortune was the stuff of local legend. And he was here, on this forgotten bench, offering me a role in a play I didn't know the lines to? Mr. Vance, I can't. This doesn't make any sense. It makes all the sense in the world. Michael, he said, using my name, a name I had never given him. He had heard it from Sarah's lips. I heard your wife. I heard every vile word. And let me be clear, a person who abandons their partner with such cruelty deserves to see exactly what they have just thrown away. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Fear, hope, and the sheer absurdity of the situation created a cocktail of adrenaline that made my hands shake. But why me? I whispered. He sighed, and for a moment, a profound sadness settled on his features. Because 30 years ago, my only son, Jonathan, was killed in an accident. He would have been about your age now. And since that day, I have lived with an emptiness that all the money in the world cannot fill. He paused, letting the weight of his confession hang between us. My driver will be here any moment. When he arrives, just play along. Help me up. Call me Dad, and trust me when I say that your life is about to change in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Before I could formulate a response, the low purr of a powerful engine approached. A black BMW SUV, so sleek and clean it looked like it had been beamed in from another planet, glided to a stop in front of us. A man in a tailored suit emerged swiftly. Mr. Vance, my apologies for the delay. There was unexpected traffic on the highway. Not to worry. David, you're perfectly on time. Arthur then extended his hand toward me. Help me up, son. The word son sent a jolt through my system. But something desperation, a flicker of defiance, or maybe just the raw, human need for a lifeline made me move. I took his hand, his grip surprisingly strong, and helped him to his feet. David, I'd like you to meet Michael. He's my son. The driver, David, looked at me with a flicker of surprise that was instantly mastered by professional decorum. A pleasure to meet you, sir, he said, nodding to me. The pleasure is mine, I managed, my voice trembling. Arthur leaned on my arm as if we had done this 1,000 times. Let's go home, son. Your aunt will be waiting for lunch. Just as I was about to step into the cool, leather-scented sanctuary of the SUV, I heard a shout. Michael! Michael, wait! I turned. It was Sarah, running from the fudge shop, a small bag in her hand, her face a contorted mask of confusion and dawning, frantic realization. She had seen it all, the car, the driver, the way I was being treated not as a burden, but as someone of importance. She skidded to a halt a few feet away, panting. Michael, what is happening? Who is this man? Arthur turned his head toward the sound of her voice, a calm, almost chilling smile on his face. I beg your pardon, ma'am, but I believe you are mistaken. My son does not have time to chat with strangers. We have a rather important family dinner to attend. Your son? Sarah's eyes darted from him to me, her brain refusing to process the scene. Michael, what is he talking about? What is all this? For the first time in 35 years, I felt a surge of power in my veins. The tables had turned, and I was no longer on the underside. Sarah, I said, my voice steady and firm, a tone I didn't recognize as my own. I think you made yourself perfectly clear just a few minutes ago. You wanted nothing more to do with me. Please don't make this any more difficult than it has to be. But I was just angry. You know how I get? I didn't mean it. Of course you meant it, I said, the truth of the words solidifying my resolve. And you know what? You were right. I do deserve something better. Arthur gave my arm a slight, approving squeeze. Michael, we must go. David, please take us home. I slid into the SUV. Arthur followed, and David closed the door with a soft, expensive thud that sounded like the closing of a tomb on my old life. Through the tinted window, I saw Sarah standing frozen, the bag of fudge dangling from her limp hand, her mouth agape as we pulled smoothly away. The drive was a silent, surreal transition between two realities. The air conditioning was a gentle hum, the classical music from the speakers a soothing balm. Are you all right? Arthur asked, his face tilted toward the window. I don't know, I admitted. I still don't understand what just happened. What just happened, he said calmly. Is that you taught someone a lesson in consequence? She saw the man she discarded like trash being treated with respect and value. But this, Michael, is merely the beginning. What do you mean? I mean that if you truly wish to change your life, if you want that woman to understand the depth of her error, you need to stay with me. You need to be my son, not for a performance, but for real. Long enough for the world to believe it. Long enough for you to believe it. My mind was a hurricane of emotions. Why? Why would you offer me this? He removed his dark glasses. His eyes were clouded with cataracts, unseeing, yet they held an intensity that felt like they were staring into the core of my being. Because I'm tired of being lonely, Michael. My son died 3 decades ago. My wife died of a broken heart 5 years later. I have a fortune that could last 10 lifetimes, but I have no one to call family. And something in your voice, in the humility with which you accepted your humiliation, tells me you are a good man who has been stripped of his dignity. I am offering it back to you. Tears welled in my eyes again, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of a hope so foreign it felt like a new sense. Yes, I heard myself say. I'll stay. I'll trust you. Good, he said, replacing his glasses. Then, son, welcome to your new life. The SUV turned off the main road and onto a long, tree-lined private drive. At the end stood a mansion, a grand colonial-style structure that seemed to belong on a movie set. Immaculate gardens, a bubbling fountain, and a wrought-iron gate that opened automatically as we approached. Welcome home, Michael, Arthur said softly. David opened our doors and I helped Arthur out. Jane, the head of housekeeping, greeted us at the entrance, her eyes widening only for a second at my presence before she schooled her features into polite neutrality. Jane, this is Michael, my son. He will be residing with us from now on. Please have the East Wing guest suite prepared for him. Of course, Mr. Vance, right away. We entered the foyer, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a palace. Marble floors reflected the light from a crystal chandelier. A sweeping staircase dominated the space, and the air smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. Arthur led me to a study, a room lined with books and rich wood paneling. Sit, Michael. We have much to discuss. He explained the plan. His lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, would begin the process of legal adult adoption. He would add me to his accounts, teach me the intricacies of his business empire, and introduce me to his world. In return, he asked only for my companionship, for me to fill the silence in his enormous empty house. The following days were a blur of surreal experiences. I was measured for new clothes that appeared in my walk-in closet. I ate meals at a table that could seat 20, with food prepared by a private chef. Arthur began my education, explaining his holdings, his corporate structure, his investments. I, who had only ever managed a warehouse crew, discovered a latent aptitude for numbers and strategy. But the outside world had not forgotten me. My phone began to buzz incessantly. Sarah, call after call, text after text, her messages shifting from anger to pleading to desperate apologies. I finally answered on the third day. Michael, oh my God, you finally answered. Where are you? What is this? Who was that man? Her voice was hysterical. You were very clear, Sarah. You didn't want to be with me anymore. You said I was a failure. Henry, I was upset. I didn't mean it. Please come home. We can fix this. I'm not coming back, Sarah. You left me with nothing. And as it turns out, it was the best thing you could have ever done for me. The line was silent for a moment. Michael, that old man. Arthur Vance, who is he to you? Why did you say you were his son? That's no longer your concern. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the divorce. Divorce? Michael, no. I'm your wife. I have rights. You forfeited those rights on a platform in the middle of nowhere, I said, and hung up. The next call was from my sister, Clara. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since she had made a snide comment about my lack of drive at a family gathering. Michael, it's Clara. I heard you're having trouble with Sarah. I'm here for you. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Clara, who had never been there for me in her life, was suddenly reaching out. The news of my association with Arthur Vance had traveled fast. The betrayal deepened when I discovered that Clara had not only sided with Sarah, but had given a sworn affidavit against me, claiming I was an emotionally abusive husband. She was willing to perjure herself to destroy my reputation, all for a piece of a fortune she thought Sarah could win from me. Arthur was prepared. Let them lie, he told me calmly. The entire property is under video and audio surveillance. We have their entire visit recorded. Every threat, every lie, we will let them hang themselves with their own rope. The preliminary hearing was a spectacle. Sarah played the wounded victim. Clara sat beside her, her face a mask of false concern. Their lawyer painted me as a manipulative con artist who had preyed on a vulnerable old man. Then our lawyer, Mr. Sterling, stood. Your Honor, the defense has conclusive evidence that refutes every claim made by the plaintiff. He presented the recordings from the mansion's security system. The judge watched, his expression growing sterner by the minute, as Sarah's fake tears turned to cold fury and Clara's venomous threats filled the room. The case collapsed instantly. The judge dismissed all of Sarah's claims, threatened both her and Clara with charges of perjury, and finalized our divorce on the grounds of spousal abandonment, granting her nothing. In the end, for the sake of Clara's children, my nephews, I dropped the charges against her on the condition she publicly retract her statements and never contact me again. It was a mercy she never would have shown me, a final act of severance from my old life. The legal adoption was finalized months later. I stood in a government office, a new birth certificate in my hand that read, Michael Vance. Arthur stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Now it's official, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You have always been my son. I took over the daily operations of Vance Enterprises, finding a purpose and a passion I never knew I possessed. Arthur became the father I had always needed, and I became the son he had lost. One evening, as we sat in his garden, he shared his final secret. Michael, I didn't find you by chance. An associate of mine was at that bus station. He saw what happened and called me. He described a man who was broken, but who carried himself with a quiet dignity even in his despair. I asked David to drive me there. I was looking for you before I even knew your name. The circle was complete. Sarah's ultimate act of cruelty was the catalyst for my ultimate redemption. I lost a wife who held me in contempt and a sister who saw me as insignificant. But I gained a father, a family, a purpose, and most importantly, I found the man I was always meant to be. The day I was abandoned was the day I was finally found.